There are places in the galaxy where reality itself has given up, where the laws of physics bow before the whims of malevolent gods, where time loses all meaning and matter becomes as fluid as thought. The Eye of Terror is such a place. It is not merely a region of space gone wrong. It is a wound in the skin of the universe itself, a bleeding scar where the material realm and the immaterium have merged into something that should not exist. And within this cosmic abomination, humans live. Or perhaps exist is a better word, because what transpires within the Eye of Terror can hardly be called life as we understand it. To comprehend what it means to be human in the Eye of Terror, you must first understand what the eye truly is. Imagine a tear in the fabric of reality, approximately 20,000 light-years across. Not a simple hole, but a region where two fundamentally incompatible dimensions occupy the same space simultaneously. The material universe, with its predictable laws and physical constants, intersects with the warp, that roiling sea of psychic energy where emotion becomes tangible and thought can reshape existence. The result is neither one nor the other, but something far worse than either could be alone. The Eye of Terror was not always there. 11,000 years before the current age, the Aeldari Empire stood at the height of its power and decadence. For millions of years, this ancient race had dominated the galaxy, their technology and psychic prowess unmatched by any other species. But success bred complacency, and complacency bred excess. The Aeldari fell into depravity so profound, so all-consuming, that their collective psychic resonance began to coalesce in the warp. Over millennia, this dark reflection of their souls grew stronger, feeding on every act of hedonism, every indulgence, every moment of sensation sought without thought of consequence. When the birth finally came, it was catastrophic beyond measure. The newborn chaos god, Slanesh, drew its first breath, and that inhalation pulled the souls of billions of Eldari into the warp in an instant. The psychic scream of their deaths was so powerful that it could not be contained within the Immaterium alone. Reality itself shattered across the heart of the old Aeldari Empire. Entire star systems were swallowed whole as the barrier between dimensions simply ceased to exist. What remained was the Eye of Terror, a permanent wound that would never heal, a gateway through which the powers of chaos could pour their corruption into the material galaxy. For 10,000 years, this scar has festered. It serves as sanctuary for the traitor legions who turned against the Emperor during the Horus Heresy, their ancient fortress monasteries and demon worlds hidden within its impossible depths. It is home to hordes of demons, those entities of pure warp energy given form by the dark emotions of mortal beings. And it is prison, playground, and feeding ground for countless human souls who have found themselves trapped within its boundaries, whether through worship, capture, or simple cosmic misfortune. The eye appears from space as a vast nebulous region, visible even from thousands of light years away. Those with the misfortune to observe it describe a swirling mass of violet, red, and purple, shot through with streaks of sickly color that seem to writhe with malevolent intent. Imperial ships avoid it by vast distances, for even proximity can prove fatal. The very space around the eye is treacherous, prone to sudden warp storms that can tear a vessel from reality without warning. Temporal whirlpools spin near its borders, capable of hurling ships backward or forward in time, or trapping them in temporal limbo, where they exist in all moments and no moment simultaneously. But for those who actually cross the threshold into the eye itself, the true horror begins. Reality, as understood by human physics, simply stops applying. The gradient is not sharp, but progressive. At the very edges, you might notice only subtle wrongness, colors slightly off, distances that do not quite match what your instruments say, a persistent feeling of being watched by something vast and malevolent. Move deeper, and the distortions become impossible to ignore. Stars that burn colors no human eye should see. Planets that orbit in patterns that violate every law of gravitational mechanics. Space itself twisting in ways that make navigation not merely difficult, but conceptually impossible. At the heart of the eye lies something the ancient texts call the byssos. It is described as a hole in the very fabric of reality, a wound so profound that raw chaos energy pours through it constantly, feeding and sustaining the eye's existence. No mortal who has ventured close to the byssos has returned to describe it, and even demons and chaos space marines avoid its vicinity. The few fragmentary reports that exist speak of a region where even the already broken laws of the eye cease to function, where reality becomes so fluid that existence itself becomes optional. Things that venture too close simply cease to be, or transform into something so alien that the concept of identity no longer applies. This is the realm into which human beings are drawn, driven, or damned. And once within its grasp, escape becomes nearly impossible. The eye does not release its captives willingly. Those who enter, even with the best intentions and strongest faith, find themselves slowly transformed by exposure to its corrupting influence. The question is not whether you will change, but how quickly and into what. The physical reality of the eye. To live in the eye of terror is to abandon any expectation that the universe will behave in consistent, predictable ways. On demon worlds within the eye, the very ground beneath your feet may shift its composition based on the thoughts of those walking upon it. The sky might burn with colors that hurt to perceive or display, constellations that rearrange themselves according to patterns that mirror the emotional states of nearby demons. Physics becomes a suggestion rather than a law, one that the ruling powers of each world choose to follow or ignore as their whims dictate. Consider Medrengard, the fortress world of the Iron Warriors' traitor legion. Imperial reconnaissance has provided fragmentary information about this nightmare realm, and what they describe defies rational comprehension. The sky over Medrengard is blindingly white, a searing expanse that burns the eyes of any who look upon it for too long. Set against this white void hangs a sun of absolute blackness, a hole in the sky that radiates not light, but an absence so profound it seems to pull at the very substance of reality around it. This inverted day provides illumination through mechanisms that no human physicist could explain, lighting a world that has been transformed into one vast fortress prison. The surface of Medrengard bears no trace of whatever natural landscape it might once have possessed. Every mountain has been carved into a fortress tower, reaching heights that would be structurally impossible on any normal world. These towers do not merely defy gravity, they seem to spite it, extending upward in configurations that should collapse under their own mass. Some plunge downward as well, dungeons that penetrate through the planet's crust into its molten core, where the screams of the imprisoned echo through chambers heated to temperatures that should vaporize human flesh instantly. Yet somehow, the prisoners live on. Tormented by heat, they cannot escape through death. Slaves on Medrengard toil endlessly in conditions that make the harshest Imperial factory world seem like paradise by comparison. They work not to produce anything useful in a conventional sense, but to fulfill the vision of Perturabo, the demon Primarch who rules this hellish domain. Great chaos warships are tethered to the tallest towers, undergoing repairs or modifications according to plans that shift with their master's moods. Forge complexes churn out weapons and armor, but the slaves who operate them have no say in their fate. They exist as living components in a vast machine of war, replaceable and expendable, valued only for their capacity to labor until they collapse from exhaustion or fall victim to one of the countless workplace hazards that proliferate in a realm where safety regulations are not merely absent, but conceptually impossible. Or consider Bubonicus, a demon world consecrated to Nurgle, the chaos god of decay and disease. This realm takes the concept of entropy and transforms it into a perverse celebration. The world's most famous feature is a vast human chain that encircles its equator. Millions of mortals holding hands, dancing and singing praises to the Plague Lord as they circle the planet in an eternal procession. This is not a metaphor or exaggeration. The prayer gang actually exists, a living ring of flesh that never stops moving, never stops chanting, never stops deteriorating. Those who join the dance do so willingly, drawn by Nurgle's promise of belonging and purpose. They sing hymns of thanksgiving for their diseases, praising the God who gives them such magnificent afflictions. As they dance, they develop Nurgle's rot, that most terrible of the Plague Lord's gifts. Their flesh begins to bloat and split, pustules erupting across their skin like obscene flowers. Maggots writhe in the wounds, yet the dancers feel no pain, only gratitude for these signs of their God's favor. Over time, weeks or months or years depending on the whim of Nurgle himself, the transformation completes. The human body dissolves, and from the putrid remains emerges a plague bearer, one of Nurgle's lesser demons. The newly born demon leaves the chain to join its master's legions, and a fresh mortal steps in to fill the gap, ensuring the circle remains complete. The planet's surface beyond. The equatorial chain is no less horrifying. Lakes of blood boil under a feverish sky, sending spheres of fire floating upward to illuminate the landscape with diseased light. These are not metaphorical lakes. Actual blood, drawn from uncounted victims, fills vast basins across Bubonicus's surface. The blood retains some spark of life, even after being separated from its source, writhing and pulsing as if still circulating through invisible veins. Mortals who fall into these lakes do not simply drown. The blood invades them, flowing into every orifice, dissolving them from within, while keeping them conscious and aware throughout the entire process. Their screams add to the chorus that echoes constantly across this world, a symphony of suffering that Nurgle finds beautiful. On the demon world called Sublime, reality has frozen in the moment of the planet's destruction. Imperial psychers who have glimpsed this world in their visions report seeing a planet caught mid-explosion, its surface fragmenting into millions of pieces that hang suspended in space like a massive sculpture of catastrophe. Time does not flow normally on Sublime. Instead, it eddies and pools, creating pockets where seconds stretch into years and areas where centuries pass in heartbeats. The demon hordes that infest this fractured world feed constantly on the essences of everyone who ever lived there, consuming not just their souls, but the very possibility of their existence, devouring the lives they might have led had the planet not been damned. Yet Sublime serves a purpose within the Eye's twisted economy. It has become neutral ground, one of the few places where rival Chaos warbands can meet without immediately descending into slaughter. Its markets, collectively known as Black Golan, deal in commodities that would be incomprehensible to honest Imperial citizens. Dreams are bought and sold here, extracted from the minds of victims and packaged for others to experience. New sensations, crafted by demon artisans, are traded like drugs. Weapons that hunger for souls change hands. Raw warp energy, stabilized through methods best left undescribed, is measured out and sold by weight. Human slaves are currency here, their value determined by factors like the purity of their souls, the strength of their despair, or the particular configurations of their mutations. The merchants of Sublime are protected by hundreds of heavily armed orbital battle stations that ring the fragmenting planet. These stations do not prevent violence. Violence is encouraged, even celebrated, but they ensure that no single faction can seize control of Black Golan's lucrative trade. The station's weapons are powerful enough to destroy entire war fleets, and they fire without discrimination on anyone who threatens the delicate balance of power that allows the markets to function. The irony is that this anarchic commerce represents one of the most stable institutions within the Eye of Terror, a testament to how completely the Eye has inverted every value and virtue the Imperium holds dear. Not all demon worlds conform to comprehensible patterns. Some exist in configurations that should be impossible, even within the eye's already broken physics. There are planets shaped like flat disks, surrounded by circling balls of fire that provide light and heat through no mechanism that human science can explain. There are tiered worlds that resemble massive wedding cakes, each layer supported by pillars of solidified thought or crystallized screams. On some worlds, the ground is composed entirely of fused human bodies, still alive, still conscious, merged into a landscape of flesh that extends for hundreds of kilometers in every direction. These amalgamated beings feel everything, the footsteps of those who walk upon them, the digging of foundations, the erosion of wind and rain, yet they cannot move, cannot speak, cannot do anything but experience their eternal torment. The manifestations of the warp do not require construction or intention to create the structures seen throughout the eye. Thought alone is sufficient. The great monuments and impossible architectures that dot demon worlds simply appear, coaxed into existence by the subconscious desires and fears of those who dwell nearby. The dark mechanicum world of Gallium is covered with smelteries and forges operated by clockwork-bodied robotic slaves, vast industrial complexes that materialized not through building, but through the warp responding to the presence of tech heretics and iron warriors. The landscape of skulls found on certain cornate worlds required no one to stack them. They arranged themselves, drawn by the blood-soaked fury that permeates such places. For mortals trying to survive in such environments, the malleability of reality creates constant danger. An undisciplined thought can become horrifyingly real. A moment of fear might manifest the object of that fear as a tangible presence. A flash of anger could transform the ground beneath your feet into a field of razor-sharp obsidian. The survivors, those who last more than days or weeks in the eye, learn to maintain iron discipline over their thoughts, never allowing their minds to wander, never permitting imagination to run free. But such discipline is exhausting, and everyone slips eventually. Those with weak minds or poor self-control are culled quickly after entering the eye, killed by manifestations of their own psyches run rampant. Those who remain are either masters of mental discipline or so thoroughly corrupted that their thoughts align perfectly with the will of chaos, making their manifestations weapons rather than liabilities. Technology, that bedrock of imperial civilization, fails spectacularly within the eye of terror. Devices that function through standard physical principles simply stop working or begin behaving in ways their creators never intended. A laser gun might fire beams of solidified shadow instead of light. A voxcaster could receive transmissions from the past or future instead of the present. Vehicles find their engines possessed by minor warp entities that have their own opinions about where the vehicle should go. Even simple tools can become treacherous. A wrench might suddenly bend like rubber, or a knife could develop an edge so sharp it cuts through the fabric of space itself. This technological unreliability explains why Chaos forces prize demon engines so highly, despite their terrible cost. A demon engine, a machine possessed by a bound demon, creating a fusion of mechanical and warp-based functionality, works reliably within the eye because it operates on principles that have nothing to do with normal physics. The demon provides the animating force, while the mechanical components serve as a physical anchor and a framework for directing that force. Such creations are expensive and dangerous to manufacture, requiring not just technical skill, but sorcerous knowledge and the willingness to bind entities that would gladly devour their would-be masters. Yet they remain the only technology that functions consistently in the eye's reality-warping environment, making them invaluable to the traitor legions. For the average human trapped within this nightmare, the breakdown of predictable physics creates an environment of constant psychological strain. You cannot trust your senses, because what you perceive might be a lie crafted by your own mind or by the warp itself. You cannot trust your tools, because they might transform into something lethal without warning. You cannot even trust the ground beneath your feet, because it might dissolve into quicksand or sprout teeth that try to devour you. Every moment requires vigilance, every action carries risk, and there is never any true safety. The Eye of Terror is, by its very nature, antithetical to human life, not in the sense that it kills quickly, but in the sense that it makes normal human existence impossible while simultaneously preventing death from offering any escape. Human societies, within the Eye, despite the impossibility of their situation, humans do form societies within the Eye of Terror. These are not communities in any sense that Imperial citizens would recognize. They lack the structure, purpose, and hope that define even the most oppressed hive world population. Instead, they are survival mechanisms, temporary assemblages of mortals clinging together in the desperate hope that numbers might provide some marginal increase in their chances of seeing another day. The human population of the Eye falls into several broad categories, each with their own terrible fate. First are the true believers, the chaos cultists, who worship the dark gods with fanatical devotion. These are the ones who entered the Eye willingly, or who were corrupted while living on demon worlds and embraced that corruption as a gift rather than a curse. They are the privileged class, if such a term can be applied in this context. Their faith grants them a measure of protection from the very worst excesses of chaos, because the gods value their worship and their service. A cultist of Horn who has proven his devotion through countless acts of murder might be spared from the blood god's rage, at least temporarily. A follower of Tzeentch who has sacrificed her sanity in pursuit of forbidden knowledge might receive visions that allow her to navigate the changing pathways of a demon world. But this privileged status is precarious at best. The chaos gods are not benevolent masters who reward loyalty with security. They are entities of pure appetite and caprice, and their favor can evaporate in an instant. A cornate cultist who hesitates for even a moment during a battle might find himself on the receiving end of his god's wrath, his blood adding to the tally that never satisfies. A Tzeentchian scholar who solves a mystery too quickly, robbing the changer of ways of the pleasure of watching her struggle, might be transformed into a chaos spawn as punishment for her efficiency. Slaaneshi devotees chase ever more extreme sensations, because what pleased the Prince of Pleasure yesterday will bore it today, and yesterday's reward can easily become today's punishment. Nurgle is perhaps the most consistent of the four, but his consistency is that of the plague. It spreads, it consumes, and it cares nothing for the individual lives it touches. Cultists organize themselves into hierarchies that mirror the pantheon they serve. Cornate cults are brutal meritocracies where strength and kill count determine status. The mightiest warrior leads until someone stronger or more savage claims his skull. Nurglite cults sometimes reflect imperial social stratification, with leadership reserved for those of noble birth, while others invert this entirely, placing the most diseased and rotting in positions of authority as proof of Nurgle's favor. Slaaneshi cults pursue structures that maximize the potential for excess and sensation, which can mean anything from rigid hierarchies, where every interaction is loaded with power dynamics, to complete anarchies, where every member pursues their own pleasures without restriction. Tzeentchian cults are the most complex, with leadership determined through schemes so convoluted that the cultists themselves often do not understand who truly holds power. These cultists often serve as intermediaries between the traitor legions and the slave populations. A Chaos Space Marine warlord might delegate the management of his mortal followers to a particularly capable cult leader, trusting that mortal to organize the rabble into useful formations for war. This is not respect or recognition of equality. It is simple pragmatism. The traitor Marines have more important matters to attend to than counting heads or distributing rations. The cult leaders who accept these positions wield real power over their fellow mortals, but they are always aware that this power is loaned, not owned, and can be revoked with a bolt shell to the skull if they displease their superhuman masters. The second category of humanity within the Eye consists of slaves, those taken in raids on Imperial worlds and brought back to demon worlds to serve. The traitor legions and their demonic allies launch frequent incursions beyond the Eye's borders, striking at worlds across the Imperium's vast expanse. These raids serve multiple purposes. They provide plunder, which the forces of chaos value despite having access to the warp's reality-shaping power. They inflict terror, which weakens the Imperium's morale and provides psychic sustenance to the dark gods. And crucially, they provide slaves. The need for slaves in the Eye of Terror is constant and insatiable. Warp-spawned plagues regularly sweep through demon worlds, killing massive percentages of the mortal population in days or hours. The work on these worlds is so brutal that even those who do not fall to disease often die of exhaustion, malnutrition, or industrial accidents. And the Chaos Space Marines use mortals as expendable troops in their endless wars, burning through human lives like ammunition. A demon world might maintain a population of millions, yet require a constant influx of tens of thousands of fresh slaves every year just to maintain those numbers. The captured are herded into the holds of chaos vessels for transport into the Eye. These journeys are nightmares in themselves. Packed into spaces far too small for their numbers, with minimal food and water, exposed to the corrupting influence of the warp without the protection of proper Geller fields, many slaves arrive at their destinations already broken in mind, if not in body. The Chaos forces prefer it this way. A shattered mind is more easily molded to accept its new reality, less likely to cling to hope of rescue or return. Upon arrival, the slaves are sorted, according to the needs of their new masters. The strong are sent to labor battalions, where they will work until they drop. The weak might be used for arcane experiments, their bodies and souls raw materials for sorcerers seeking to unlock new horrors. The attractive or unusual might be claimed by Slaneshi devotees for purposes best left to the imagination. The faithful, those who still cling to belief in the Emperor, are particularly prized by some chaos warlords. There is special pleasure to be found in breaking such spirits, in watching hope die in their eyes as they realize the Emperor cannot save them here. A third category exists, those who fled into the Eye, seeking refuge from imperial justice or persecution. Not all who enter the Eye do so in chains. Some come by choice, though calling it choice may be generous. They are criminals fleeing execution, heretics running from the Inquisition, psychers escaping persecution, mutants seeking any place where their deformities might not mark them for death. They enter the Eye believing it might offer sanctuary, failing to understand that sanctuary and the Eye of Terror are mutually exclusive concepts. These refugees quickly discover their mistake. The Eye offers no protection, no safe haven. A mutant fleeing imperial intolerance will find that the mutations inflicted by the Eye make his original deformities seem trivial by comparison. A psyker seeking freedom from imperial control will discover that in the Eye, his powers are amplified 1,000-fold, and so is his vulnerability to demonic possession. A heretic who thought imperial rule oppressive will learn what true tyranny means under the casual cruelty of chaos lords who view mortal life as a resource to be expended without thought. Yet some do find a perverse form of success in the Eye. A criminal with no moral restraints might thrive in an environment where might makes right, and conscience is a fatal weakness. A particularly cunning individual might carve out a position of relative power by playing various chaos factions against each other. A psyker might gain abilities that would be impossible in the Imperium, though the cost to their sanity and soul will be immeasurable. These success stories are rare, and success is a term that must be used loosely, but they exist, and they attract others seeking similar outcomes, perpetuating the flow of desperate souls into the Eye's grasp. Human settlements in the Eye, where they exist at all, cluster around sources of relative stability. Near the fortresses of Chaos Space Marines, mortal populations gather in sprawling camps, offering service in exchange for protection from the demon hordes. On worlds where agriculture is possible, and it is, though what grows from warp-tainted soil defies every principle of biology, communities form around the fields, bound together by the shared need to produce food and the shared knowledge that failure to meet quotas means death. In the markets of sublime and similar neutral grounds, permanent populations of traders and merchants establish themselves, operating in the shadows of the great powers, always alert to shifts in the balance of power that might threaten their precarious existence. These communities have no government in the imperial sense. Law, where it exists, is enforced through strength and fear rather than any concept of justice. The strong take what they want from the weak. The weak band together when possible, finding safety in numbers, but such alliances are fragile and prone to collapse at the first sign of advantage to be gained through betrayal. Trust is a rare and precious commodity, doled out sparingly even between family members, because anyone might be corrupted or possessed at any moment, transforming from ally to threat without warning. Social structures emerge despite the chaos, though they bear little resemblance to imperial norms. In some communities, Chaos Space Marines, or particularly powerful, daemons rule as absolute despots, their word carrying the force of divine commandment. In others, councils of cult leaders negotiate constantly shifting agreements about resource allocation and territorial boundaries, though such agreements rarely last more than weeks before some new crisis or opportunity renders them obsolete. On rare occasions, strong individuals establish domains where they maintain order through sheer force of will and sufficient firepower, creating small islands of relative stability in the eye's madness, though even these eventually fall to internal betrayal or external conquest. The economy of these communities operates on principles of scarcity and desperation. Food is always in short supply, because reliable agriculture is nearly impossible in the eye. Those demon worlds where it can be practiced produce crops mutated almost beyond recognition, plants that might sprout teeth or scream when harvested, vegetables that pulse with unnatural life. Many learn to supplement their diet with the dead, cannibalism being common enough that it raises no moral objections. On some worlds, the bodies of the fallen are butchered and distributed with the same casual efficiency as an imperial processing plant packages corpse starch. Water, too, is often contaminated by warp energies. On some demon worlds, the only available water runs red with blood or black with corruption. Those who drink it feel their bodies changing from within, but thirst eventually overcomes caution. The fortunate mutate in ways that allow them to continue functioning. The unfortunate transform into things that can no longer be called human, joining the ranks of chaos spawn that prowl the wastelands. Trade exists after a fashion. Slaves are the most common currency, measured in units of labor potential or soul value. Weapons and armor are precious, especially those that function reliably in the eye's reality-warping environment. Knowledge has value, information about safe routes, through shifting demonscapes, the locations of exploitable resources, the current disposition of various chaos warlords. Favors are traded, debts accumulated and called in, though few are foolish enough to trust that such obligations will be honored unless enforcement mechanisms exist. Children born within the eye face fates even grimmer than those of the adults around them. Many are mutated from birth, their bodies warped by exposure to chaos energies while still in the womb. Those born without visible mutation are often sacrificed or sold, considered either worthless or suspiciously pure. The ones allowed to live grow up knowing nothing but the eye's horrors, developing psychologies shaped entirely by constant trauma and the need to adopt the eye's values to survive. They know no other way of being, which in some ways makes their plight even more tragic. They cannot even conceive of the possibility of a better life, because they have never experienced anything that might hint at such possibilities. Daily life and survival. To speak of daily life in the Eye of Terror is to describe a contradiction. The word daily implies regular cycles, predictable patterns, the kind of routine that allows humans to plan and organize their existence. But in the eye, time itself is unreliable. Days might last hours or years. The cycle of light and dark follows no consistent pattern, if it exists at all. On some demon worlds, eternal twilight bathes everything in sickly luminescence. On others, darkness absolute is broken only by the glow of burning cities or the corpse light of demons passing through. For a slave laborer on Medrengard, awakening comes not with the rising of a sun, but with the clang of hammers on bars, the shouting of overseers, the crack of whips laced with barbed wire. You rise from whatever hard surface you collapsed onto after the previous work shift, shifts that might have lasted 3 hours or 30, depending on the whims of your masters and the fluid nature of time in this cursed place. Your body aches from exertions that push flesh to its breaking point and beyond. Injuries that would kill you in real space heal with unnatural speed in the eye, but they heal wrong, leaving you twisted and in constant pain. This is Nurgle's gift to all who dwell in this place. You do not die easily, which means you can suffer much longer than should be possible. Breakfast, if it comes at all, is a thin gruel made from sources you try not to think about. The taste is vile, but you eat because the alternative is starvation. And while the eye might keep you alive longer than you should be, it will not sustain you without fuel. Around you, other slaves eat in silence, too exhausted or broken to speak. Some bear mutations that make eating difficult, mouths that have migrated to strange positions on their bodies, teeth that have fused together, tongues that have split into writhing tendrils. They manage as best they can, because the alternative is to forego sustenance and face the consequences. The work itself varies depending on which demon world you occupy and which master claims your labor. On Medrengard, you might spend your shift dragging massive chains that haul components for Chaos war machines through the fortress factories. The chains are heavy enough that they should require dozens of workers, yet you pull with perhaps 5 or 6 others, because most of your crew died yesterday and have not yet been replaced. The replacement slaves are in transit, somewhere in the warp between the eye and whatever Imperial world suffered the most recent raid. You pull until your muscles scream, until your hands bleed from gripping the corroded metal, until you think you cannot possibly take another step, and then you pull more, because stopping means a bolt from an overseer's gun. Some work at the forges, pouring molten metal into casts shaped like screaming faces or twisted runes. The heat would be lethal on any normal world, but here it merely adds to your torment without granting the mercy of death. Your flesh blisters and chars, then regenerates, then blisters again in an endless cycle. The metal you pour is not normal steel or iron, but materials that should not exist, alloys forged from substances drawn from the warp itself. Sometimes the metal screams as you pour it. Sometimes it tries to flow back upward, defying gravity in its desire to escape the casts. You force it down anyway, using tools that burn your hands even through thick gloves, because failure to complete your assigned task means punishment worse than mere pain. Others work at assembly stations, fitting together components whose purpose you do not understand and dare not question. The components change as you work on them, their shapes shifting in response to thoughts you cannot control. A piece that was square moments ago has become circular. Something that should be flat has developed spikes that puncture your palms when you try to grip it. You adapt, improvise, find ways to complete your task despite the impossibility of working with materials that refuse to obey even basic principles of geometry. Those who cannot adapt are removed, dragged away to fates that the rest of you try not to imagine. The overseers watching your work are a mix of humans who have sold their souls for tiny scraps of power, and the traitor marines themselves, those transhuman warriors who betrayed the Emperor 10,000 years ago yet live on, preserved by the same time distortions that plague everyone in the eye. When a Chaos Space Marine walks through your work area, you keep your head down and work faster, because attracting their attention is never positive. They might kill you for entertainment. They might grab you for use in some dark ritual. They might simply look at you with eyes that have seen horrors beyond description, and in that look, you see what you are becoming, what awaits you if you survive long enough. Not death, but transformation into something that makes death seem desirable. On worlds dedicated to Nurgle, the work is different, but no less terrible. You might labor in fields where diseased crops grow with horrifying vitality, tending plants that weep pus and bleed when cut. The very air carries infection, and each breath you take introduces new pathogens into your system. You sicken, but you do not die. Nurgle grants his followers the gift of endurance, the ability to live despite carrying enough disease to kill 100 normal humans. Your body becomes a garden for his plagues, a mobile incubator for new and terrible afflictions. You spread contagion wherever you go, and you learn to find joy in this, because joy is the only alternative to despair, and Grandfather Nurgle teaches that all things rot eventually, so you might as well smile while you decay. Some tend to Nurgle's demonic servants, creatures like Nurglings and plague bearers that require care and feeding. This involves tasks that would make a strong stomach heave, cleaning fouled pens where Nurglings play in pools of filth, harvesting the diseased organs that plague bearers shed regularly, preparing meals from ingredients so contaminated that they would kill anyone not already blessed by Nurgle's corruption. You perform these duties without complaint, because the alternative is to be fed to the very creatures you tend, becoming part of their diet rather than their caretaker. On Slaaneshi worlds, labor takes forms designed to maximize sensation and experience. You might be forced to create art that depicts scenes of such depravity that looking upon your own creations threatens your sanity. You spend hours painting, sculpting, or writing, driven by compulsions you cannot resist, creating works that celebrate excess in all its forms. The best pieces are taken by your Chaos Space Marine masters, or traded to other servants of the Dark Prince. The inferior works result in punishment, not death, which would be too simple, but torments calibrated to teach you the difference between merely shocking and truly transcendent depravity. Some become performers, trained to provide entertainment at the courts of Chaos Lords. This might involve dance, music, or acts that cannot be described without descending into obscenity. You learn to push your body beyond its natural limits, to contort in ways that should break bones, to endure pain and pleasure in measures that should shatter the mind. The audiences that watch your performances are demons and damned souls alike, and pleasing them requires constantly escalating extremes. What satisfied them yesterday bores them today, so you must always find new depths to plumb, new boundaries to cross. Sentient demon worlds demand different forms of labor. You might spend your time cataloging grains of sand, counting each one individually and recording its measurements in ledgers that will never be read. This task serves no purpose you can discern, yet you must perform it with absolute precision, because errors result in being transformed into something less human. Or you might be assigned to solve impossible puzzles, riddles that have no answers, mathematical equations that violate the basic rules of arithmetic. Success is as dangerous as failure in Tzeentch's realm. Solve the puzzle, and you might be rewarded with knowledge that destroys your sanity. Fail, and you might be transformed as punishment for your inadequacy. Breaks from work, when they come, offer no real rest. You collapse where you stand, too exhausted to seek proper shelter. Sleep is no refuge in the eye, because dreams here are literal things, bleeding into reality with terrifying ease. You dream of home, of the imperial world you were taken from, and wake to find that your dream has partially manifested around you. A fragment of familiar architecture, a scrap of cloth in the colors of your old regimental uniform. These fragments are cruel mockeries, reminders of what you have lost, and they dissolve quickly, leaving you with nothing but intensified awareness of your current reality. Meals are irregular and inadequate. On some demon worlds, The slave populations receive rations calculated to keep them functional, but always hungry. On others, food is distributed randomly, a lottery where some receive more than they can eat, while others starve. You learn to eat whatever is provided without questioning its source. The meat might come from human corpses, processed into something vaguely palatable. The vegetables might be products of warp-twisted agriculture, their cellular structure so altered that they cannot be properly called plants anymore. It does not matter. You eat, because hunger is one of the few sensations that even the eye cannot completely suppress. Water is similarly problematic. Clean water is a rarity bordering on myth. What passes for water in the eye is often contaminated by psychic residue, carrying flavors of emotions and experiences that have soaked into it through proximity to the warp. You drink, and you taste the despair of everyone who drank from the same source before you. You taste fear, hatred, suffering distilled into liquid form. Some demon worlds have no water at all, and the slave populations subsist on other fluids: blood taken from the veins of the recently dead, ichor harvested from demonic creatures, condensed warp fog collected in basins and filtered through methods that leave it barely potable. Personal hygiene is impossible under such conditions. You become encrusted with grime, blood, and worse. Wounds fester, but do not kill, transforming into permanent fixtures of your body. Your clothing, if you have any, becomes so fouled that it can barely be distinguished from your skin. On Nurglite worlds, this filth is celebrated, considered a sign of the Plague Lord's favor. On worlds dedicated to other gods, it is simply accepted as inevitable. The concept of cleanliness belongs to the Imperium, you left behind, a luxury that has no place in your current existence. Disease is universal. Everyone carries infections, though their severity and symptoms vary. On non-Nurglite worlds, these diseases are simply endured. On Nurgle's domains, they are worn with pride, each new symptom considered a blessing. You learn the names of the plagues that inhabit your body, the way you once knew the names of your family members. You monitor their progression with interest, discussing your symptoms with other slaves as if comparing notes on children's accomplishments. This is not madness exactly, it is adaptation, finding ways to cope with circumstances that would otherwise drive you to self-destruction. Mutation is also inevitable, exposure to chaos. Energies warps flesh in unpredictable ways. You might wake one day to find that you have grown an extra finger, or that your eyes have changed color to something not found in nature. These minor mutations are common enough that they provoke no reaction. More severe changes are harder to ignore. A second mouth opening in your torso, limbs that bend in new directions, skin that becomes translucent or scaly. Each mutation makes you less human, though the process is so gradual that you do not notice yourself crossing the threshold until you have already passed far beyond it. Relationships, when they form, are twisted by the eye's influence. You might develop attachments to other slaves, finding comfort in shared suffering, but these bonds are fragile, easily broken by death, transformation, or betrayal. Trust is difficult when everyone around you is slowly becoming something inhuman. Love is nearly impossible when you know that the person you care for today might be a gibbering chaos spawn tomorrow. Yet humans crave connection even in the worst circumstances. And so you reach out anyway, knowing the pain that likely awaits, but unable to stop yourself from hoping that this time might be different. Sex occurs, though calling it intimacy would stretch the term to breaking. On Slaneshi worlds, it is often mandatory, performances commanded by masters who feed on the emotions generated. On other demon worlds, it happens in dark corners when overseers are not watching, brief moments of human contact in an inhuman environment. Children result from these unions, and their births are tragedies. They enter the world already corrupted, and their lives will be even harder than those of their parents, because they will know nothing but but the eye's horrors from their first breath. Violence punctuates daily existence. Slaves fight each other over scraps of food, marginally better sleeping spaces, or simply because the pressure of their situation demands some outlet and violence is the most readily available. The overseers encourage this, finding entertainment in watching mortals tear each other apart. Sometimes they organize formal combats, forcing slaves to fight to the death for the amusement of Chaos Space Marines. The winners receive rewards, extra rations, temporary exemption from work details, the privilege of living another day. The losers die, and their bodies are recycled into the eye's endless hunger for resources. Entertainment, if such a term applies, consists mainly of watching others suffer. Public executions of those who displeased their masters, ritual sacrifices to the chaos gods, gladiatorial contests where slaves battle each other, or demon creatures. These spectacles are not optional. Attendance is mandatory, because the chaos powers feed on the emotions of the crowds, drawing psychic sustenance from the fear and despair of observers. You watch because you must, and you try not to think about when your turn will come, when you will be the one in the arena rather than the audience. Religion, in the traditional sense, is dead. The emperor cannot hear prayers from within the eye, if indeed he could ever hear them at all. Those who cling to faith in the emperor find that faith tested beyond breaking. You pray and receive no answer. You beseech the god emperor for deliverance and receive only silence. Eventually, you either abandon your faith or transform it into something the Inquisition would recognize as heresy. Some begin praying to the chaos gods instead, believing that worship might earn them marginally better treatment. Others create new religions, melding fragments of imperial doctrine with chaos imagery in combinations that would make a priest weep. A few maintain their faith despite everything, though whether this represents strength of spirit or simple stubbornness is difficult to determine. Hope is the rarest commodity in the Eye of Terror, not the hope of escape. That dies quickly, usually within days of arrival. But smaller hopes persist. The hope that tomorrow's work detail might be less brutal than today's. The hope that the next ration distribution might actually provide enough food. The hope that you might survive long enough to see a friend or loved one more time before transformation or death claims them. These tiny hopes are all that keep some slaves functional, slender threads preventing complete psychological collapse. Yet even these small hopes are dangerous, because the eye delights in crushing them. The work detail you hoped would be easier turns out to be worse. The friend you hoped to see has been taken for a ritual sacrifice. The mutation you hoped would stay minor suddenly accelerates, transforming you into something monstrous. The eye teaches that hope is foolish, that acceptance of your fate is the only rational response. And slowly, inexorably, most slaves learn this lesson, surrendering the last vestiges of their humanity in exchange for the numbness that makes continued existence bearable. The demon world experience. To understand life in the Eye of Terror, one must comprehend that each demon world is not merely a planet corrupted by chaos, but a physical manifestation of a specific god's nature and the will of the demon prince who rules it. These worlds are not places in the conventional sense. They are domains, territories carved out of the eye's mutable reality, and shaped according to visions that no sane mind could produce. The world of Sicarus serves as the primary stronghold of the Word-Bearer's traitor legion, those first and most devoted servants of chaos undivided. Unlike demon worlds dedicated to single gods, Sicarus honors all four chaos powers equally, creating an environment where the competing influences blend into something uniquely terrible. The planet's surface is completely covered by vast sprawling cathedrals, temples, and monuments, all dedicated to worship of the ruinous powers. Not a single square meter of natural terrain remains. Everything has been built over, paved, or otherwise transformed into architecture of worship. For the mortals who live on Sicarus, existence revolves entirely around religious observance. You are awakened by bells that ring at irregular intervals, their tones causing physical pain to any who hear them. You attend services that last for hours or days, led by dark apostles whose sermons describe the glory of chaos in terms that make your ears bleed. You participate in rituals that require you to cut yourself, offering blood to the gods while chanting words in languages that predate human civilization. You prostrate yourself before idols carved from human bones, their features shifting to display the faces of all four chaos gods in rotation. The sky above Sycharis is not sky at all, but rather a roiling mass of fire and blood that never stops moving. Looking up at it for too long causes vertigo and nausea, as your mind tries and fails to interpret the patterns it sees. Some claim to perceive messages in the sky's movements, prophecies or commands from the gods. Whether these visions are genuine or products of chaos-addled minds makes no practical difference. All such revelations are recorded by scribes and added to the endless libraries that the word-bearers maintain. Food on Sycharis comes primarily from gardens where plants are grown using soil enriched with the ground bones of sacrificial victims. These gardens are tended by mortal cultists who consider it a holy duty to nurture crops that will feed both their fellow mortals and the word-bearers themselves. The plants that grow from this tainted earth are technically edible, though they carry faint psychic impressions of the dead whose remains fertilize them. You eat and taste not just the vegetable matter, but also the emotions of the sacrificed, their fear, their pain, their final desperate prayers. This is considered appropriate on Sycharis, a reminder that all sustenance ultimately comes from the gods. The word-bearers themselves are ever present on Sycharis, moving through the vast cathedrals like crimson-armored gods among mortals. They are not like the Chaos Space Marines of other legions, consumed by single-minded devotion to one aspect of chaos. The word-bearers maintain a cold, calculating approach to their damnation, viewing chaos as a truth to be embraced rather than a passion to be indulged. This makes them paradoxically more terrifying in some ways. They damn your soul with the same methodical precision a scribe might use to catalogue inventory. When a word-bearer addresses you directly, it is usually to assign some task related to the Legion's missionary work. You might be sent to prepare texts for distribution to Imperial worlds, documents written in code that appear innocuous but contain seeds of corruption designed to germinate in readers' minds. You might serve as a test subject for new rituals, your body and soul used to determine whether a particular ceremony produces the desired results. You might simply be observed, studied as an example of how chaos corruption progresses in mortal flesh, with the results recorded for future reference. On Zana 2, the demon world of the Dark Mechanicum, the experience is entirely different. This Hellforge is dedicated to production, to the creation of weapons and demon engines that will serve the long war. The entire planet has been transformed into a single massive factory, with furnaces that burn at temperatures found in stellar cores and assembly lines that stretch for hundreds of kilometers. The enslaved population of Zana 2 works in conditions that make traditional Imperial factory worlds seem humane by comparison. You are assigned to a specific section of the production line, and there you remain for the entirety of your service, which might be weeks or decades, depending on how local time flows and how long your body endures. Your task might be as simple as pulling a lever when materials pass your station, or as complex as assembling components whose function you cannot comprehend and whose very shapes seem to violate geometric principles. The Dark Mechanicum overseers who manage these production lines are grotesque fusions of flesh and machine tech priests who have abandoned the Omnissiah for darker sources of knowledge. They have modified their bodies to such extremes that little humanity remains, if indeed they ever were fully human. Some have replaced their heads with sensor arrays that process information at speeds that would drive an organic brain to madness. Others have grafted demon-possessed weapons directly onto their bodies, their arms ending not in hands but in plasma cannons or power claws. They communicate with each other in binaric cant, mixed with demonic languages, creating a cacophony of sound that hurts to hear. The products of Zana II's forges are shipped throughout the Eye of Terror and beyond, supplying Chaos warbands with the weapons they need to wage war against the Imperium. You might spend your entire existence helping to build Hellblades, those demon-possessed fighter craft that scream as they fly. Or you might work on Hell Talons, larger aircraft whose machine spirits have been replaced by bound demons that hunger for the souls of those they kill. The irony is not lost on you that the fruits of your labor will be used to damn other humans, to spread the corruption that claimed you to innocent populations across the galaxy. The environment on Zana II is hostile to organic life in ways that go beyond mere physical danger. The air itself is thick with particulate matter, ash from the forges, atomized metal, and stranger substances. Each breath you take deposits these particles in your lungs, slowly transforming your respiratory system into something more mechanical than biological. Your lungs become partially metal, capable of processing the polluted air, but no longer fully organic. This is considered a blessing by the Dark Mechanicum, evidence that the gifts of the machine are superior to weak flesh. Drakassi represents yet another variation on the Daemon world theme. This gladiatorial planet exists primarily to entertain its ruling class, which includes demons, chaos space marines, barbarian chieftains, and mortal nobles who have carved out positions of power through cunning or strength. The planet is divided into regions, each controlled by a different faction, and warfare between these regions is constant and encouraged. As a slave on Drakassi, your primary purpose is to fight in the arena. You are given minimal training, just enough to make you marginally more effective than a complete novice, and then thrown into combat against other slaves, mutated beasts, or minor demons. The fights are not fair because fairness would reduce the entertainment value. You might face an opponent armed with a power sword while you carry only a rusty knife. You might be forced to battle a creature 3 times your size that breathes fire and has skin like armor plate. The specific matchup matters less than the spectacle of your struggle. If you survive your first few fights, you begin to accumulate small advantages. Better weapons, basic armor, perhaps the services of a medic who can patch your wounds between bouts. These improvements are not gifts, they are investments by your owners, who have placed bets on your continued survival and wish to protect their interests. You are property, a commodity whose value increases with each victory, but who can be discarded without hesitation when defeat seems imminent. The ruling class of Drakassi watches these contests from elevated seats, gorging themselves on food and drink while you bleed in the sand below. They place complex wagers on the outcomes, betting not just on who will win, but on specific details. How long the fight will last, what wounds will be inflicted, whether the loser will beg for mercy before dying. Your suffering is quite literally their entertainment, and they consume it with the same casual pleasure an imperial noble might derive from a theatrical performance. Lord Ebendrake, the demon prince who rules Drakassi, maintains the largest arena on the planet, a vast amphitheater capable of holding hundreds of thousands of spectators. Special occasions see massive battles staged here, with hundreds or thousands of combatants thrown into the arena simultaneously. These bloodbaths can last for days, the fighting pausing only when exhaustion overcomes the survivors. The sand of the arena is stained red-black from millennia of blood, and some say that the spirits of those who died there linger, their suffering adding to the psychic resonance that makes Drakassi so appealing to the servants of Khorne. Between fights, you are kept in pens with other gladiators, living in squalor that makes your value as entertainment seem contradictory. But this is intentional. The contrast between the misery of your daily life and the brief moments of purpose you find in combat is part of what makes the spectacle appealing. You are kept desperate, hungry for any opportunity to distinguish yourself, willing to fight with savage intensity for the promise of slightly better conditions. Some gladiators do achieve a measure of status. If you survive long enough, accumulate enough victories, You might be granted minor privileges, a private cell instead of communal pens, your choice of weapons before fights, even the possibility of winning your freedom if you can defeat a particularly challenging opponent in a special bout. These carrots are dangled before you, keeping you fighting, even when every rational part of your mind screams that you should simply refuse, that death would be preferable to this endless cycle of violence. But refusing means immediate execution, and something in the human spirit resists that choice, even in the most terrible circumstances. You fight because fighting means you are still alive, still capable of agency, even if that agency is limited to how enthusiastically you kill those placed before you. And each time you win, each time you stand over the body of someone you just killed, you feel a terrible satisfaction that has nothing to do with genuine triumph and everything to do with having postponed your own death one more time. The Crone world called Belial 4 offers a different nightmare. This was once a capital of the ancient Aeldari Empire, a world of culture and beauty, now transformed into a ghostly wasteland, haunted by echoes of its former inhabitants. The psychic residue of billions of Aeldari dying simultaneously when Slaanesh was born has soaked into the very stones of this world, creating an environment where the past and present blur together. Humans who find themselves on Belial 4, usually Chaos Space Marines and their servants seeking Aeldari artifacts, experience constant psychic assault. The ghosts of the dead Aeldari are not conscious entities, but rather impressions, recordings of their final moments played on infinite loop. You hear their screams echoing through ruined palaces. You see phantom figures running in terror from threats that existed 11,000 years ago. You feel their despair, their horror, their disbelief that their civilization could have fallen so catastrophically. These psychic impressions are dangerous not because they can harm you directly, but because they erode your sanity through constant exposure. Each scream you hear is accompanied by a fragment of the emotion that produced it, fear so intense it transcends time itself. Each phantom you see carries with it a piece of the Aeldari's collective death experience, and your mortal mind was never meant to process such things. Prolonged exposure leaves you haunted, unable to distinguish between the ghosts and genuine threats, seeing enemies in every shadow and hearing warnings in every sound. But the real danger on Belial 4 comes from Slaanesh's demons, which prowl the ruins constantly, drawn by the same psychic resonance that makes the world so traumatic for visitors. These demons are not content to simply kill, they wish to make you experience the same corruption that claimed the Aeldari, to force you to understand the depths of depravity that birth a god. If caught by them, your suffering would be artistic, a masterwork of torment designed to maximize every sensation while preventing you from escaping through death or madness. Despite these dangers, Chaos warbands regularly venture to Belial 4 in search of Aeldari soulstones and other artifacts. These have value in the Eye's economy, both as tradable commodities and as components for dark rituals. If you are part of such an expedition, your role is likely to be that of expendable scout, sent ahead to trigger any defenses or attract the attention of lurking demons, while your Chaos Space Marine masters remain at safe distance. Mental and spiritual corruption. The physical changes wrought by the Eye of Terror are horrific enough, but they pale beside the transformations that occur in the mind and soul. These changes are subtle at first, easy to dismiss or rationalize. A thought that feels alien to you, quickly suppressed. A dream that lingers too vividly after waking. A moment where you find yourself enjoying something that should disgust you. Small things, easily ignored. But they are the first signs of corruption taking root. The process accelerates with time. The warp energies that saturate every demon world within the Eye do not merely affect your flesh. They seep into your thoughts, your emotions, your very sense of self. You begin to notice patterns where none exist, messages hidden in random noise, significance in meaningless coincidence. This is Tzeentch's influence, the architect of fate, reshaping your perception until you see the world as a vast conspiracy in which every event connects to every other in ways only you can perceive. Or you feel anger rising without cause, sudden surges of rage that demand violent outlet. You find yourself fantasizing about bloodshed, imagining in vivid detail how you would kill those around you. The fantasies become more intrusive, harder to resist, until finally you act on them and discover that the violence brings satisfaction beyond anything you have ever known. This is Horn's touch, the blood god amplifying your capacity for fury until it consumes every other aspect of your personality. Perhaps instead, you experience the opposite, a dulling of emotions, a creeping numbness that makes everything feel distant and unreal. Pain loses its edge, fear becomes muted, even despair fades into resignation. But alongside this emotional flatness comes something else, a newfound appreciation for decay, for the beauty inherent in corruption and rot. You look at a festering wound and find it aesthetically pleasing. You smell putrefaction and inhale deeply, savoring the odor. Nurgle has claimed you, granted you his gift of cheerful acceptance of all things that decay. Or you chase sensation, any sensation, because the baseline of existence in the eye has become so numbing that you need ever stronger stimuli to feel anything at all. You seek out pain because at least pain confirms you are still capable of feeling. You pursue pleasure in increasingly extreme forms, discovering that what would have horrified your former self now barely registers. Slaanesh has you in her grasp, teaching you that there are no limits, that every boundary exists only to be crossed. These changes do not announce themselves. There is no moment where you suddenly realize you have become a servant of the dark gods. The transformation is gradual, progressive, a slow erosion of everything you once were, until looking back at your past self feels like remembering a stranger. You do not wake up one morning having completely changed. Instead, you accumulate small changes day after day, and each change makes the next one easier to accept, until eventually you have traveled so far from your starting point that return becomes impossible, even if you wanted it. Memory becomes unreliable. The warp's influence does not merely add new thoughts but alters existing ones, rewriting your history to better align with your current corrupted state. You remember always having been angry, even though some distant part of you insists that you were once gentle. You recall enjoying the taste of blood, though fragments of memory suggest you were once repulsed by it. These contradictions do not resolve. They exist simultaneously in your mind, creating a cognitive dissonance that further weakens your grip on reality. Your personality fragments. In the morning, you might be dominated by rage, striking out at anyone who approaches. By afternoon, the rage has receded, replaced by overwhelming sorrow that brings you to tears. Evening finds you numb, capable of witnessing atrocities with complete indifference. Night brings inappropriate euphoria, manic energy that makes sleep impossible. These mood swings are not natural emotional variation. They are the influence of different chaos powers, waxing and waning in their grip on your soul, each claiming temporary dominance before being displaced by another. Language itself becomes corrupted. You find yourself using words that you do not remember learning, speaking in tongues that predate human civilization. Sometimes you slip into dark tongue without realizing it, only becoming aware when others look at you with fear or confusion. The words carry power. Speaking them makes reality ripple, causes minor manifestations of the warp. You might describe something as beautiful and watch as the object in question literally transforms to become more aesthetically pleasing. You might curse someone and see them struck by genuinely supernatural misfortune moments later. Your values invert. Concepts like mercy, compassion, honor, these strike you as weaknesses, foolish sentiments that have no place in the eye's ruthless reality. You embrace cruelty as simple pragmatism. You see betrayal as clever strategy. You view loyalty as naive trust that deserves to be exploited. These are not conscious choices to abandon morality, but rather natural conclusions drawn from your experiences, your mind, adapting to its environment in the same way a body adapts to poison by building tolerance. Relationships with other humans become impossible to maintain. You cannot trust anyone because you know that everyone around you is undergoing similar corruption, and you can never be certain which version of a person you are interacting with at any given moment. The friend who was helpful yesterday might be dominated by different influences today, transforming them into a threat. Even family bonds dissolve under the strain. You might look at your own child and see only a potential rival for resources, or a convenient sacrifice for some ritual that might earn you favor with the gods. Faith, whether in the emperor or the chaos gods themselves, becomes complicated. Those who maintain belief in the emperor find that belief tested beyond breaking. You pray and receive no answer, no sign that your devotion is noticed or valued. You call on the emperor to save you from torments, and nothing changes. Eventually, you must either acknowledge that the emperor cannot or will not help you here, or you must create increasingly elaborate rationalizations for why your prayers go unanswered. Both paths lead to madness, either the madness of accepting that you are abandoned, or the madness of maintaining belief in the face of overwhelming evidence that your faith is misplaced. Those who turn to worshipping chaos discover that the dark gods are equally unreliable. You offer prayers to Khorne and receive no acknowledgement. You perform rituals for Tzeentch and see no results. The gods do not need your worship. They extract psychic sustenance from your emotions, regardless of whether those emotions are directed toward them intentionally. Your prayers are shouted into a void, and whether that void responds is entirely dependent on the whims of beings whose motivations are fundamentally incomprehensible to mortal minds. Some attempt to maintain a mental foothold in reality by establishing personal rules or rituals. You might count your steps, always taking the same number before allowing yourself to rest. You might arrange objects in specific patterns, believing that maintaining these patterns will somehow protect your sanity. You create private meanings for random events, interpreting signs and omens to give yourself the illusion of understanding. These coping mechanisms help for a time, providing structure in an environment designed to prevent structure from existing. But eventually, the eye breaks even these small defenses, revealing them as the futile gestures they are. Dreams become prophetic, or at least appear to be. You dream of events that subsequently occur, though whether you actually foresaw the future or whether the warp simply manifested your dreams into reality is impossible to determine. The distinction ceases to matter. Either way, your inner mental life is bleeding into the external world, the boundary between self and environment eroding until you cannot tell where you end and the eye begins. Hallucinations are common. You see things that others do not, hear voices whispering secrets or lies, feel phantom touches on your skin. These are not always products of your own deteriorating mind. Sometimes they are genuine manifestations of the warp, minor demons, or psychic phenomena made visible by the eye's proximity. But other times, they are purely internal, your brain creating stimuli in response to the constant psychic pressure bearing down on it. Learning to distinguish between real and imaginary threats is essential for survival. Yet the eye makes this distinction impossible to maintain with any certainty. Eventually, for most, there comes a point of no return. The accumulation of corruptions reaches critical mass, and you transform into something that can no longer be called human in any meaningful sense. Your body mutates beyond recognition. Your mind becomes a fractured collection of impulses without coherent thought to unify them. Your soul, already claimed by one or more of the chaos gods, loses whatever individuality it once possessed, becoming merely another drop in the vast ocean of damned energy that sustains the dark powers. This final transformation most commonly produces what are known as chaos spawn, gibbering, shapeless horrors that bear no resemblance to their original forms. A chaos spawn was once human, or space marine, or some other sentient being, but now it is nothing but mutation given flesh. a writhing mass of tentacles, mouths, eyes, and stranger appendages that defies description. It exists in constant agony, aware enough to understand what it has become, but too far gone to do anything about it. It serves as a warning to others. This is what awaits those who survive the eye too long, the ultimate fate of all who dwell within chaos's domain. Some few avoid this fate through sheer strength of will, maintaining their sanity and humanity despite years or decades of exposure. These individuals are rare beyond measure, possessed of psychological resilience that borders on the superhuman. They survive by developing rigid mental disciplines, by never allowing their thoughts to wander, by maintaining absolute focus on immediate practical concerns rather than contemplating the broader horror of their situation. They are valuable to Chaos Space Marine warlords because slaves who retain their faculties are more useful than mindless spawn. But even they know that their reprieve is temporary. Eventually, everyone in the eye succumbs. The only question is when. The Chaos Space Marines and their servants. The relationship between the traitor legions and their mortal followers is one of the great paradoxes of the Eye of Terror. The Chaos Space Marines need mortal servants to perform tasks beneath the dignity or capability of transhuman warriors. Yet they also despise those mortals as weak, corrupt, and ultimately expendable. This paradox creates a dynamic where humans are simultaneously essential and worthless, their survival dependent on proving constant utility while knowing that utility will never earn them genuine respect or protection. The Chaos Space Marines themselves are beings that transcend normal human comprehension of what a warrior can be. They are not merely enhanced humans, but demigods of war, each one a veteran of 10,000 years of conflict, their bodies modified far beyond baseline human capacity, even before accounting for the mutations wrought by their exposure to chaos. When a Chaos Space Marine walks through a slave camp, mortals instinctively cringe away, recognizing something that exists on a different tier of reality than they do. Communication between Chaos Space Marines and their mortal servants is brutally functional. The transhuman warriors rarely waste words on explanations or courtesy. An order is given once, and failure to comply or understand results in immediate execution. You learn to interpret commands quickly, to anticipate needs before they are articulated, because asking for clarification is often treated as a sign of incompetence worthy of death. Those who survive long in service to Chaos Space Marines develop an ability to read subtle cues in body language and tone that their masters probably do not realize they provide. Different Chaos Legions treat their mortal followers in different ways, reflecting their parent god's nature and their own specific cultural practices. The Word-Bearers view mortals as souls to be shepherded toward proper worship of chaos, which grants servants a measure of protection as long as they demonstrate appropriate devotion. A Word-Bearer might actually take time to explain a ritual's purpose to a mortal participant, not out of kindness, but because proper understanding enhances the ritual's effectiveness. This makes service to the Word Bearers slightly less immediately lethal than service to other legions, though the long-term spiritual consequences are arguably worse. The Iron Warriors treat mortals as components in a vast military machine, valued for specific functions, but otherwise ignored. An Iron Warrior will use mortal workers to accomplish tasks that would bore or demean an Astartes, moving supplies, performing basic maintenance, filling defensive positions that require bodies rather than skill. The work is brutal, but there is a kind of cold rationality to it. You are a tool, and as long as you function adequately as that tool, you will likely survive. Sentiment does not enter the equation, which means you are spared the casual cruelty that some legions inflict for entertainment, but you are also granted no considerations beyond pure utility. The World Eaters are perhaps the most straightforward in their use of mortals. They barely notice human existence except as sources of skulls for horn. Serving the World Eaters means existing on a knife's edge of terror. knowing that at any moment one of the Astartes might turn on you in a fit of bloodlust and tear you apart simply because you were nearby when the urge to kill became overwhelming. The only safety lies in being useful in ways that do not require close proximity. You might transport supplies, remaining at a distance while the World Eaters butcher their way through enemies. You might maintain equipment, working only when the Astartes are engaged in combat elsewhere. But even these precautions offer limited protection. A World Eater in the grip of the nails, those neural implants that drive them to ever greater violence, will kill literally anything in reach. The Emperor's children use mortals for purposes that would be obscene to describe in detail. Service to the Three Legion means becoming an object, valued only for your capacity to provide sensation or serve as a canvas for artistic expression that happens to involve acts of profound depravity. You might be forced to perform for noise marines, those grotesque specialists who have transformed their bodies into living instruments of sonic destruction. Your screams, properly modulated, become part of their obscene symphonies. Your pain, artfully inflicted, provides the raw emotional content that fuels their Slaneshi devotions. Death would be a mercy, but death is withheld from you for as long as your suffering proves entertaining. The Death Guard, those putrid servants of Nurgle, treat mortals with something approaching paternal affection. But it is the affection one might show to beloved pets, or particularly interesting bacterial cultures. A Death Guard might genuinely care whether you survive, in the same way a farmer might care about livestock. This care does not prevent them from exposing you to diseases that cause your organs to liquefy, because in the Death Guard's twisted worldview, such afflictions are gifts to be celebrated, rather than curses to be avoided. You are welcomed into Grandfather Nurgle's garden, and if you sicken and rot, well, that only proves the Plague Lord's love. The Thousand Sons present perhaps the strangest case, because most of that legion are not truly alive anymore, reduced to animate suits of armor containing nothing but dust and sorcerous binding. The few remaining flesh and blood sorcerers who lead the Thousand Sons treat mortals as components for rituals, sources of psychic energy to be harvested and directed toward arcane purposes. Your fear, your despair, your dying scream, all of these have power that a skilled sorcerer can manipulate. You might be sacrificed, not in anger or for entertainment, but simply because the spell being cast requires a mortal soul as fuel, and you happen to be convenient. The Black Legion, Abaddon's unified force drawn from all the traitor legions, employs mortals in more complex roles than most warbands. The Warmaster's long-term strategic goals require functioning, human societies to provide resources and intelligence, which means some mortals are granted positions of genuine authority over their fellows. A particularly capable human might rise to command entire slave armies, leading them in battle alongside Chaos Space Marines. This is not freedom or respect. You are still property, still expendable, but it does represent the closest thing to a career path that exists for mortals in the Eye. Regardless of which legion you serve, certain universal truths apply. You are always aware that your masters could kill you without effort or consequence. You are never safe from their attention. You exist at their sufferance, and that sufferance can be revoked at any time, for any reason, or no reason at all. This creates a psychological pressure that never relents. A constant low-grade terror that becomes so familiar you almost stop noticing it. Except that it never truly fades, and the moment you let your guard down is often the moment when a Chaos Space Marine decides your death would be amusing. Serving in actual combat alongside Chaos Space Marines reveals the vast gulf between mortal and transhuman capabilities. You witness Astartes performing feats that should be impossible, leaping dozens of meters, shrugging off wounds that would kill you instantly, fighting with a speed and ferocity that your eyes can barely track. They are living weapons, each one capable of annihilating scores of normal humans without significant effort. This understanding of your own inadequacy becomes visceral when you fight beside them. You do your best, fire your weapon, try to be useful, but you are always aware that you are fundamentally unnecessary to the battle's outcome. The Chaos Space Marines could win without you. Your presence serves mainly to provide additional targets that might absorb some enemy fire that would otherwise be directed at your masters. The relationship extends to the demon princes and greater demons that rule many daemon worlds within the eye. These entities are even further beyond human comprehension than Chaos Space Marines, beings of pure warp energy that have transcended mortality entirely. They regard mortals the way you might regard bacteria, aware of their existence, occasionally finding them useful, but fundamentally indifferent to them as individuals. A greater demon might command millions of mortal followers, but it knows none of them by name, cares nothing for their individual fates, values them only as aggregate resources to be deployed or consumed as circumstances dictate. Yet mortals are necessary. The demon princes and chaos lords need agents who can operate in the Imperium, where their own presence might be limited or impossible. They need workers to maintain infrastructure, because even demon worlds require basic logistics to function. They need warriors to fill out armies, because even the infinite hordes of the warp benefit from mortal auxiliaries who can hold territory and perform tasks that do not require supernatural power. This need creates the only leverage mortals have. You might be individually worthless, but collectively you are indispensable, and the smart survivors learn to make themselves just useful enough to be kept alive without becoming important enough to be noticed. The wars between rival demon princes and chaos warlords consume mortals in staggering numbers. These conflicts are not fought for resources or territory in the conventional sense. The eye's reality-warping nature means that material concerns matter less than they would in real space. Instead, the wars are fought for glory, for entertainment, for the favor of the chaos gods, or simply because violence is an end unto itself when you serve powers that embody conflict. Mortal followers are mobilized for these wars, not because their contributions will be militarily significant, but because their suffering and death generate psychic energy that sustains the demonic forces. You might find yourself conscripted into an army assaulting a rival demon world, thrown into battle against forces that far exceed your capacity to resist. The opposing side has demons, mutants, chaos space marines, entities that will kill you without effort. You are given minimal equipment and less training, pointed at the enemy and told to attack. Survival is not expected or required. Your purpose is to die in numbers sufficient to please Khorne, or creatively enough to amuse Slanesh, or while screaming prayers to Nurgle, or while cursing the names of Tzeentch's enemies. How you die matters more than whether you accomplish anything tactical. The fortunate perish quickly in these battles, a bullet or blade ending their existence before they can fully comprehend the horror unfolding around them. The unfortunate survive the initial contact and find themselves in protracted combat, killing and being killed across terrain that shifts beneath their feet, under skies that weep blood or fire. You fight because the alternative is to be killed by your own side for cowardice. You kill because the enemy is trying to kill you. And if you survive long enough to see the battle's conclusion, a conclusion that might come hours or years later, depending on how time flows in the affected region, you are herded back to your home world, there to await the next war, the next slaughter, the next expenditure of mortal lives, for purposes you cannot comprehend. Time, memory, and identity. One of the Eye of Terror's most insidious torments is what it does to time itself. In the Imperium, time flows in one direction at a consistent rate. You age, events occur in sequence, cause precedes effect. These basic facts create the framework through which humans understand existence. But in the Eye, time is as mutable as space, flowing at different rates in different locations, sometimes reversing, occasionally creating loops where events repeat endlessly with slight variations. For mortals, trapped in this temporal chaos, the effects are profoundly disorienting. You might work a shift that feels like 8 hours, only to be told that weeks have passed in the outside world, or you labor for what seems like years, aging visibly. your body breaking down from accumulated wear, only to discover that mere days have elapsed. This disconnect between perceived time and actual time makes it impossible to track how long you have been in the eye. You lose all sense of duration, unable to anchor yourself to any objective measure of temporal passage. The Chaos Space Marines who fled into the eye after the Horus Heresy 10,000 years ago are still alive, still fighting, preserved by the same temporal distortions that torment their mortal servants. From the perspective of real space, millennia have passed. But within the eye, many of these ancient traitors have experienced far less subjective time. A Chaos Space Marine who entered the eye in the 31st millennium might have experienced only a few centuries of subjective time by the 41st millennium, their aging slowed or halted by the fluid nature of causality in Chaos's realm. This creates the bizarre situation where ancient enemies of the Imperium can be confronted by their great-great-great-grandchildren, yet appear only marginally older than they did at the time of the heresy. For mortals, this temporal fluidity has different consequences. You do not benefit from slowed aging. If anything, the eye accelerates your deterioration, adding mutations and corruption to natural senescence. But you can experience time in ways that shatter your understanding of sequential existence. You might remember events that have not yet occurred, because in some time stream they have already happened, even though in your current moment they remain future. You might encounter younger or older versions of yourself, temporal echoes created by time loops that trap certain moments in endless repetition. These temporal loops are particularly cruel. You might find yourself repeating the same day over and over, Groundhog Day style, but without the possibility of escape through moral improvement. Each iteration is nearly identical to the last, with only minor variations that make you question whether you are actually repeating events or simply experiencing false memories of repetition. Other trapped mortals around you seem unaware of the loop, living the same day for what might be the first time or the thousandth, impossible to determine. The only way to preserve your sanity is to stop counting iterations, to accept that this day is your eternity, and find what meaning you can within its limited scope. Memory becomes unreliable in ways that go beyond simple forgetting. The warp's influence does not merely erase memories, but alters them, inserting false experiences that feel as real as genuine recollection. You remember events that never happened, conversations you never had, people you never met. These false memories integrate seamlessly with real ones, creating a personal history that is part truth and part fiction, with no way to distinguish between them. Did you really have a family before being brought to the eye? Or is that just a comforting delusion your mind created to give you something to hold on to? Were you ever actually a loyal Imperial citizen? Or have you always been a servant of chaos, and your memories of resistance are simply lies you tell yourself? This memory corruption serves to erode your sense of identity. You define yourself through your past, the accumulated experiences that make you who you are. But if your past is unreliable, if your memories shift and change without your conscious awareness, then who are you really? The question has no answer, and contemplating it too deeply leads to existential vertigo that can shatter your sanity as surely as any physical torment. Some mortals cope with this by abandoning attachment to continuous identity entirely. They accept that the person they are today might not be the same person they were yesterday, that their memories and personality might shift without warning. This acceptance allows them to adapt to the eye's reality, but it comes at the cost of losing whatever made them individuals. They become fluid, protean, capable of being reshaped by circumstance because they have no fixed self to defend. Others try desperately to maintain some core of unchanging selfhood, clinging to specific memories or values as anchors against the chaos. This is psychologically healthier in some ways, preserving a sense of continuity, even if that continuity is partially illusory. But it is also more painful, because every time the eye challenges or contradicts your chosen anchors, you must either defend them, which requires enormous mental effort, or abandon them, which feels like losing part of yourself. The temporal whirlpools that exist near the eye's borders present another form of temporal torment. Ships that venture too close can be caught in these phenomena, hurled backward or forward through time, or trapped in temporal limbo where they exist in all moments and no moment simultaneously. For mortals aboard such vessels, the experience is nightmarish. You might find yourself aging rapidly, decades passing in seconds, your body withering while your mind struggles to process the accelerated time. Or you might be frozen, conscious but unable to move or act, watching as events unfold around you at normal speed, while you remain locked in a single instant that stretches into seeming eternity. Some temporal whirlpools create loops that trap their victims in repeating sequences of events. A ship might emerge from the warp at a specific location, proceed along a particular course for a set duration, then be pulled back to its starting point to begin the sequence again. The crew experiences this loop repeatedly, some becoming aware of the repetition after numerous iterations, others never realizing that they are caught in a cycle because their memories reset with each new loop. For those who become aware, the horror is existential. You are trapped in time, forced to relive the same events over and over with no hope of escape or variation. The relationship between the eye's interior and the outside galaxy creates additional temporal complications. Time flows differently inside versus outside, which means that coordinating actions between the two becomes nearly impossible without sophisticated temporal calculations that mortal minds cannot perform. A Chaos warband might spend what feels like weeks preparing for a raid, only to emerge from the eye and discover that years have passed in real space and their planned target no longer exists. Or they might experience years of subjective time in preparation, emerge to find that only hours have elapsed, arriving at their target far too early for their plans to make sense. For individual mortals, these discrepancies mean that any sense of connection to the wider galaxy becomes impossible to maintain. If you were brought to the eye from an imperial world, everyone you knew there has likely died of old age by now, even if your subjective experience suggests only months or years have passed. The Imperium you remember has changed, evolved, fought wars you never heard about. You are temporally displaced, a person out of time, and returning to the world you once knew, even if such return were possible, which it almost certainly is not, would mean confronting a future where you no longer belong. This temporal displacement contributes to the sense of isolation that pervades mortal existence in the eye. You are cut off, not just spatially, but temporally, from anything you once knew. The past is unreliable, memory corrupted by the warp. The present is fluid, time flowing at inconsistent rates. The future is unknowable, both because prediction is impossible in the eye's chaos and because you likely will not survive long enough for long-term planning to matter. You exist in an eternal now that is simultaneously all times and no time, trapped in a moment that never ends and never was. Some mortals develop strategies for maintaining temporal orientation despite these challenges. You might mark your body with scars for each perceived day that passes, creating a physical record of subjective time, even if objective time tells a different story. You might maintain a journal, writing entries that document your experiences even though you know those experiences might be false memories by the time you read them again. These coping mechanisms provide structure and the illusion of control, which is psychologically valuable even when you intellectually understand their limitations. Others abandon the attempt to track time entirely, surrendering to the eye's temporal chaos. They live moment to moment, responding to immediate stimuli without concern for past or future. This produces a kind of peace, a freedom from the anxiety that comes with trying to maintain temporal coherence in an environment designed to prevent it. But it is also a form of death, the death of that aspect of humanity that plans, that learns from experience, that understands itself as a continuous being persisting through time. The few forms of resistance. In an environment as overwhelmingly hostile as the Eye of Terror, genuine resistance seems impossible. The forces arrayed against mortals are so vast, so powerful, that opposition appears futile. Yet some few individuals and groups do resist, maintaining their humanity and their opposition to chaos, despite everything the eye throws at them. Their resistance takes forms that would be unrecognizable to conventional military thinkers, because traditional resistance requires resources, organization, and hope, none of which exist in useful quantities within the eye. The resistance of individual will is the most common and most personal form. This is not organized rebellion, but rather the private, internal struggle to maintain values and identity in the face of corruption. You resist by refusing to enjoy the suffering of others, by feeling guilt when you are forced to commit atrocities, by clinging to memories of who you were before the eye claimed you. This resistance is invisible to outside observers. From their perspective, you are indistinguishable from any other slave, performing the same tasks, suffering the same hardships. But internally, you fight a war against the slow erosion of your humanity, and every day you wake up still recognizing yourself as a person rather than a thing is a victory. This internal resistance is exhausting. It requires constant vigilance, constant effort to maintain mental boundaries that the warp seeks to dissolve. You must monitor your thoughts, catch yourself when you begin to accept or enjoy things that should horrify you. Force yourself to feel compassion and empathy even when those emotions serve no practical purpose and might actually make your situation worse. The temptation to surrender, to let go and accept your corruption as inevitable, is constant and powerful. After all, resistance causes you pain while surrender offers a kind of peace, the peace of no longer fighting a battle you cannot win. Yet some do maintain this resistance for years or even decades of subjective time. They are often people who had strong moral frameworks before entering the eye, individuals whose values were central to their identity rather than mere social conditioning. A priest who genuinely believed in the emperor's divinity might maintain that faith even when all evidence suggests the emperor either cannot or will not intervene in the eye. A soldier who took her oath of service seriously might continue to resist chaos on principle, honoring a commitment even when the Imperium she swore to serve is inaccessible. These internal resistors do not expect reward or recognition. They resist because the alternative is to become something they cannot accept being. Organized resistance is far rarer because organization requires communication and trust, both of which are nearly impossible to maintain in the eye. Nevertheless, small cells of resistors do occasionally form. These are typically composed of people who were captured together and managed to maintain bonds strong enough to survive their early exposure to chaos. A squad of Imperial Guard taken in a raid might stay loyal to each other, forming a core group that supports each other psychologically and helps maintain each other's humanity. The bonds between them are precious and fragile, constantly tested by the environment and by their own growing corruption. Such resistance cells cannot engage in conventional rebellion. They lack weapons, resources, and the numbers necessary for meaningful military action. Instead, their resistance takes the form of small sabotages, minor acts that provide symbolic opposition without triggering massive retaliation. A resistor might accidentally ruin a batch of manufactured goods, introducing defects that will make them useless. Another might provide false information to overseers, causing minor delays or inefficiencies. A third might offer comfort to fellow slaves, providing emotional support that helps others maintain their own internal resistance. The impact of these actions is negligible from a strategic perspective. The chaos forces lose nothing that matters, and the resistors gain nothing material. But the actions serve a psychological purpose for those who perform them. They are assertions of agency, demonstrations that despite being enslaved, despite being corrupted, the resistors still have the capacity to choose. Each small act of sabotage or support is a declaration. I am still human. I still have will. I am not yet defeated. The resistors know their efforts will ultimately fail, The eye does not release its captives, and everyone succumbs to corruption eventually. But they resist anyway, choosing to die as humans rather than live as monsters, to lose themselves fighting rather than surrender themselves willingly. This is not pragmatic. It is purely moral, a stance taken because the alternative is to abandon everything that makes existence meaningful. Some resistors attempt escape. This is almost certainly doomed because escape from the eye requires navigating through the warp without proper ships or navigators, fighting through demon hordes and chaos space marines, and somehow making it to the eye's edge despite temporal distortions that might send you backward in time rather than forward toward freedom. Yet the attempt itself has value, providing purpose and direction to lives that would otherwise be nothing but suffering. Planning an escape gives you something to think about other than your immediate torment, a goal to work toward, a reason to survive one more day. These escape attempts, when they occur, are typically crushed quickly. A slave who steals a weapon and tries to fight her way out is gunned down within minutes. A group that attempts to commandeer a transport vessel is discovered before they can even board. The chaos forces are too powerful, too numerous, too alert to the possibility of rebellion. But occasionally, very occasionally, an escape attempt achieves something beyond mere symbolic gesture. A group might actually make it to a ship, might even pilot it into the warp, though the journey inevitably ends in disaster, pulled into a temporal whirlpool, consumed by demons, or simply lost in the Imperium's depths where real space and the warp blur into lethal chaos. Religious resistance exists, but is complicated by the fact that the chaos gods demonstrably exist and demonstrably have power. A mortal who maintains faith in the Emperor does so despite clear evidence that within the eye, the Emperor's protection does not extend. Prayers go unanswered. The Emperor's light does not shine here. Those who cling to imperial faith must either accept that the Emperor has abandoned them, a position that tends to destroy faith rather than sustain it, or develop theological justifications for why their suffering serves the Emperor's purposes in ways they cannot understand. This latter position can maintain faith, but requires mental gymnastics that become increasingly difficult as corruption progresses. Some develop syncretic beliefs that blend imperial doctrine with acknowledgement of chaos's reality. They might continue to revere the Emperor as the true god of humanity, while accepting that in this damned realm, the chaos gods hold temporary sway. This is heresy by any imperial standard, but in the eye, survival sometimes requires heterodoxy. These syncretic believers walk a knife's edge, maintaining enough connection to their original faith to feel human, while adapting enough to their current reality to remain functional. Others abandon specific religious frameworks entirely, developing personal philosophies of resistance based on basic moral principles rather than theology. They resist because cruelty is wrong, because dignity matters, because reducing sentient beings to tools is unjust. These resistors ground their opposition in humanistic values rather than divine commandment, which has the advantage of not requiring them to reconcile their faith with their abandonment by their God. But it also leaves them more vulnerable to corruption by Tsanch, whose servants delight in engaging philosophical resistors in debates designed to undermine their convictions. The question that haunts all resistors, internal or organized, religious or philosophical, is, what is the point? Their resistance accomplishes nothing material. It does not weaken chaos, does not liberate anyone, does not even significantly inconvenience their oppressors. They will be corrupted and destroyed eventually, regardless of how they fight. So why resist at all? The answer, when resistors have the lucidity and honesty to articulate it, is that resistance is not about achieving victory. It is about maintaining humanity as a value in itself, choosing dignity over survival when the two come into conflict. A resistor might say, I will be destroyed, but I will be destroyed as a human being who fought against evil, not as a corruption-addled thing that embraced it. The resistance is its own justification, an end rather than a means, performed because the alternative is to surrender the last thing that makes existence meaningful. This position is noble, but it is also exhausting and often brief. The psychological costs of sustained resistance are enormous, and most who attempt it eventually break. They wake up one day to find that they no longer feel revulsion at things that once horrified them. They realize they have begun to enjoy aspects of their corruption. They understand that they have crossed the threshold from resisting to accepting, and the worst part is that the crossing feels like relief, like laying down a burden they were never strong enough to carry. The few who maintain resistance longest are often those who should have broken earliest. The gentle, the compassionate, the idealistic. By all logic, these should be the first to shatter in the eye's harsh environment. Yet sometimes their very idealism provides strength that pragmatic cynicism cannot match. They resist not because they think it will succeed, but because they literally cannot conceive of doing otherwise. Their values are so fundamental to their identity that abandoning them would be equivalent to ceasing to exist. And so they hold on until mutation or death claims them, dying as humans in a realm designed to transform humans into monsters. Notable demon worlds and their populations. Beyond the major demon worlds already described, the Eye of Terror contains hundreds or thousands of lesser demon worlds, each with its own particular horror, its own ruling power, its own populations of damned mortals. To describe all of them would be impossible, but examining a few of the more notable examples reveals the range of experiences available to those trapped within Chaos's realm. The demon world of Oliensis presents one of the most bizarre configurations in the Eye. The planet itself is alive, not metaphorically but literally. It takes the form of an immense, morbidly obese humanoid figure curled into a fetal position in space. Its surface is skin, continents shaped like facial features or limbs. Rivers are blood vessels visible beneath translucent dermis. Mountains are bones or tumorous growths pushing up from beneath. Cities built by mortal inhabitants nestle in folds of flesh, their foundations secured to subcutaneous fat. Living on Oliensis means living as a parasite on a host that is conscious and aware. The world responds to what occurs on its surface sometimes shifting in response to the presence of those walking upon it. An area experiencing violence might develop growths resembling defensive structures, spines, or hardened patches protecting that region. Regions where Slaaneshi excess is performed might become more sensitive, the ground itself responding to stimulus, like living skin. This makes construction difficult. You build on terrain that might transform overnight in response to the emotional content of events occurring nearby. The mortal population of Oliensis consists mainly of Slaaneshi cultists who revel in the world's grotesque nature. They see the living planet as the ultimate expression of their god's power, a being transformed so completely by excess that it became a world. They treat its surface with the reverence religious pilgrims might show a shrine, except their reverence is expressed through acts of depravity rather than solemn prayer. They believe that pleasing the world itself, inducing responses from its living surface, grants them favor with Slaanesh. The world sometimes produces substances from pores in its surface, fluids that range from clear plasma to viscous oils. The cultists collect these secretions, using them in rituals or consuming them directly. The effects vary unpredictably. Some secretions produce euphoric highs. Others cause mutations. A few are lethal poisons that kill in seconds while flooding the victim's senses with overwhelming sensation during those final moments. The cultists pursue these substances with addicts' fervor, always seeking new experiences, even knowing the risks. The demon world of Harmony offers contrast to the excess of other chaos realms. This world appears at first glance to be almost pleasant. Rolling fields of crops, small villages where mortals go about seemingly normal lives, skies that cycle through day and night in reassuring patterns. Travelers who stumble upon harmony report feeling confused, uncertain whether they have actually entered a demon world at all. The people seem relatively content, going about agricultural labor without the overt suffering characteristic of other demon worlds. The horror of harmony reveals itself slowly. The people are trapped in stasis, repeating the same actions day after day without variation or awareness of the repetition. They are not truly alive, but rather animated corpses, their souls consumed long ago by whatever chaos power created this world. They perform their tasks with mechanical precision because they cannot do otherwise. Biological automatons executing programs without consciousness or will. The crops they harvest regrow instantly. The meals they prepare are never eaten. The work they do accomplishes nothing because the world resets each night, returning everything to its previous state. New arrivals to harmony, those who stumble upon it by accident or are deposited there by some demon's whim, find themselves drawn into the pattern. You begin repeating the same actions as the locals, unable to break free from the world's influence. Each day you wake with the intention of resisting, of doing something different, but by evening you realize you have performed exactly the same tasks as yesterday. Over time, your memories begin to fade, your awareness dimming until you too become one of the animated corpses, trapped in eternal repetition without consciousness of your imprisonment. The demon world called the flesh market serves exactly the purpose its name suggests. This is where the I's economy of slaves reaches its most literal expression, a world entirely dedicated to the buying and selling of mortal flesh. The landscape is covered with auction houses, processing facilities, holding pens, and transit stations. Slaves are brought here from across the eye, sorted by characteristics like physical strength, psychic potential, aesthetic qualities, or specific mutations. They are then sold to buyers who might be Chaos Space Marines, seeking recruits, demon princes, desiring sacrifices, or mortal warlords, building armies. The population of the flesh market consists of the enslaved and those who trade in them. The latter group has developed complex social structures based on their position in the slave economy. Master traders command fleets and employ thousands of subordinates. Mid-tier dealers operate smaller operations, specializing in particular types of merchandise. At the bottom are the individual flesh peddlers, who kidnap or scavenge mortals from other demon worlds, bringing them to the flesh market for sale. Being brought to the flesh market means being processed like livestock. You are stripped, examined, your physical characteristics measured and recorded. Particularly valuable individuals, psychers, those with rare mutations or possessing unusual beauty, are placed in premium lots for auction to wealthy buyers. The bulk of slaves, however, are sold in batches, measured by weight or volume rather than individual assessment. You might find yourself crammed into a holding pen with hundreds of others, awaiting purchase by whoever needs laborers in quantity and does not care about quality. The auction process is dehumanizing in ways that transcend mere indignity. You are placed on a platform before an audience of buyers and forced to demonstrate your capabilities. A strong laborer might be made to lift weights or fight other slaves. A psyker would be subjected to tests of their powers. Someone with aesthetic qualities valued by Slaneshi buyers might be forced to perform acts that showcase those qualities. Throughout, you are discussed as merchandise, your worth calculated in terms of utility, with no acknowledgement of personhood. Those who are sold find their fates determined entirely by their purchasers' needs and whims. A Space Marine warband might buy laborers in bulk to work their forges, where you will toil until death or mutation. A demon prince might purchase attractive individuals for a court of pleasure slaves. A dark mechanicum facility could acquire psychers for experimental research into methods of binding demons into machinery. The specific fate varies, but all share the common thread of being reduced to a resource, valued only for instrumental use. The world of Gallium, mentioned briefly earlier, deserves fuller examination. This dark mechanicum stronghold represents the most successful industrial demon world in the eye. Unlike most demon worlds where industry is sporadic and unreliable, Gallium maintains consistent production of weapons, armor, and demon engines that supply chaos forces throughout the eye and beyond. The industry of Gallium was not built in the conventional sense. The world's surface was once something else. Imperial records suggest it might have been a forge world that fell to chaos during the heresy. But whatever it was before, it has been completely transformed by the presence of the dark mechanicum, tech heretics, and iron warriors who claimed it. The landscape spontaneously generated industrial structures in response to their presence. The warp, manifesting their desires for production capacity into physical reality. The mortal population of Gallium works in conditions that make normal factory labor seem generous. You might be assigned to a furnace that burns hot enough to vaporize flesh, your job to feed materials into its maw using tools that barely protect you from the heat. Or you could work assembly lines, where demon-possessed components try to kill workers who handle them because the demons bound into the machinery resent their imprisonment and lash out at anyone in reach. The work is dangerous, the environment is toxic, and death is common. But replacement workers arrive regularly from slave raids, ensuring the production never stops. The products of Gallium's forges are distributed throughout the eye's economy, sold or traded to whoever has the resources to pay for them. A Hellblade fighter craft, manufactured on Gallium, might be piloted by Emperor's children in a raid on an Imperial world, its machine spirit screaming with bloodlust as it strafes civilian populations. A suit of power armor forged here could be worn by a word-bearer dark apostle as he leads cultists in ritual sacrifice. The weapons you help create will be used to kill, corrupt, and damn countless thousands across the galaxy, and you are forced to participate in this production, knowing full well the purposes your labor serves. The fate of souls in the eye. In the Imperium, death is understood as the end of physical existence, but not necessarily the end of the soul. The faithful believe their spirits will join the Emperor in some form of afterlife. The skeptical accept death as simple cessation. But in the Eye of Terror, death offers no escape and no peace. The soul persists, and its persistence is a curse far worse than any mortal torment. When you die in the Eye, your soul does not depart to whatever destination might await humans who die in normal space. Instead, it remains trapped within the Eye's boundaries, unable to escape the gravitational pull of the massive warp presence that defines this realm. Your spiritual essence, freed from the anchor of your physical body, becomes fully exposed to the warp's influence without even the limited protection that flesh provides. The Chaos Gods are always hungry for souls. Each of the four great powers feeds on mortal emotions and psychic energy, and a free-floating soul is a feast waiting to be consumed. Depending on which god claims dominion over the demon world where you died, your soul will likely be drawn to that god's presence in the warp. A Hornate world means your soul will be pulled toward Horn's realm, there to be consumed by the blood god or his servants. A Nurglite domain delivers you to the Plague Lord's garden. Slaneshi and Tzenchian worlds direct souls to their respective patrons. The consumption of a soul is not instantaneous annihilation. The Chaos Gods derive more sustenance from souls that suffer, that maintain consciousness while being devoured. Your spiritual essence is broken apart slowly, piece by piece, while you remain aware of what is happening. The process might take subjective years or centuries, depending on the god's appetite and the soul's resilience. During this extended dissolution, you experience every moment of your destruction, feeling yourself being unmade but unable to do anything to stop or speed the process. Some souls are not consumed but transformed. If you showed particular devotion to a chaos god during life, demonstrated qualities that God values, you might be elevated rather than annihilated. A cornate warrior who died gloriously in battle might become a bloodletter, one of Khorne's lesser demons. A Nurglite who cheerfully embraced disease might transform into a plague bearer. These transformations are considered rewards by the Chaos Gods, but from the perspective of what you were, they represent total destruction of identity. The bloodletter, or plague bearer you become, will bear no trace of the human you were. All memories, all personality, all individuality erased, replaced by the monomaniacal focus that characterizes lesser demons. Souls that resist consumption or transformation might linger in the eye as wraiths or spirits, conscious echoes of mortals who refuse to accept their fate. These spiritual remnants haunt demon worlds, their presence manifesting as cold spots, phantom voices, or apparitions visible only to those with psychic sensitivity. They are not ghosts in the traditional sense. They have no agency, no ability to interact meaningfully with the physical world. They are simply trapped, bound to the location of their death by their eyes' warped physics, doomed to watch existence continue around them without being able to participate or escape. The existence of these wraiths is torment of a particular kind. You are aware of your surroundings but cannot affect them. You see other mortals suffering and cannot help. You watch Chaos Space Marines and daemons committing atrocities and cannot intervene. You are a passive observer of horrors, unable even to close your eyes or look away, forced to witness everything that occurs near your haunting ground for what might be eternity. Some demon worlds actively harvest souls for specific purposes. The planet of the sorcerers, home to the Thousand Suns, uses captured souls as fuel for sorcerous rituals. Your spirit might be bound into a spell construct, providing the psychic energy necessary to power some arcane working. This binding is agonizing, your essence twisted and wrung out like a cloth to extract every drop of power. When the ritual is complete, what remains of you is discarded, a depleted husk too damaged to maintain consciousness, but not quite destroyed enough to cease experiencing existence. Other worlds use souls as building materials. Certain chaos structures are literally composed of human spirits, their essence solidified through sorcery into walls, floors, or decorative elements. You might become part of a fortress, your consciousness trapped within stone that was once your soul, aware of everything that occurs within the structure, but unable to move or speak or do anything except exist. The agony of this state is subtle but constant, a low-grade torment that never spikes to unbearable intensity, but also never relents. The worst fate might be to become a chaos spawn. This can occur posthumously, your soul pulled from death and forced back into a physical form that bears no resemblance to anything you were. The spawn is mutation made manifest, a gibbering mass of flesh that defies description and serves no purpose except to exist in suffering. You are conscious within the spawn, aware that the hideous thing shambling through demonscapes and attacking anything in reach is you, but you have no control over its actions. You watch yourself behaving as a monster, killing and consuming without reason or restraint, and you cannot stop yourself. The Imperium teaches that the Emperor protects faithful souls even in death. This might be true in real space, where the Emperor's presence as a psychic beacon could potentially guide or shield dying spirits. But in the eye, the Emperor's light does not reach. Prayers for protection go unheard, or, worse, are intercepted by entities that delight in corrupting even the final moments of the faithful. A dying mortal might pray to the Emperor for deliverance and instead attract the attention of a demon that mocks them by appearing in the guise of angelic rescue before revealing its true nature and claiming the soul for its master. This spiritual torment extends even to those who were never fully corrupted during life. You might have maintained your resistance, preserved your humanity despite years of exposure to chaos, died still believing in the Emperor and the values of the Imperium. None of this protects you after death. Your soul is claimed by the eye regardless of how you lived or what you believed. Virtue provides no armor in death. Faith grants no sanctuary, resistance earns no reward. The eye takes all who die within its bounds, treating saint and sinner with equal indifference. Some heretical texts suggest that very rarely, very occasionally, a soul might escape the eye's grasp. A psyche of exceptional power might have enough control over their spiritual essence to resist the warp's pull, projecting their consciousness beyond the eye's boundaries before complete death. Or a soul might be rescued by forces from outside. A Grey Knight strike force equipped with specialized equipment for soul retrieval might successfully extract a valuable individual's spirit from the eye's influence. But these are exceptions so rare as to be effectively mythical. For the vast majority of mortals who die in the eye, their end is not an end at all, but a transition to forms of existence that make mortal life seem preferable by comparison. The knowledge of this spiritual fate weighs heavily on those still living in the eye. You know that death will not release you from torment. You understand that no matter how terrible your current existence, it can and will get worse when your body finally fails. This knowledge removes what little comfort the prospect of death might otherwise provide. There is no escape, not even through mortality's ultimate door. You are trapped, not just in life, but in existence itself, doomed to continue in some form forever, or at least for as long as the eye endures, which, given its nature as a permanent wound in reality, might well be until the heat death of the universe or beyond. This transforms the experience of living in the eye from merely horrible to genuinely existential in its dread. You are not suffering temporarily with the hope that death will end it. You are suffering as a prelude to worse suffering, with the only certainty being that your torment will continue in some form regardless of what happens to your physical body. The Chaos Gods have you, and they will never let you go. Your screams will echo through the warp for eternity, adding to the psychic miasma that sustains the very powers that torment you. Conclusion. To live in the eye of terror is to exist in a state that transcends normal categories of human experience. It is not life as the Imperium understands it. There is no hope, no future, no possibility of improvement or escape. Yet it is not death either, because you remain conscious, aware, capable of suffering in ways that the truly dead cannot experience. You exist in a liminal state between the two, denied the benefits of either while experiencing the worst aspects of both. Every moment in the eye is an exercise in endurance. You endure physical torment that would kill you in real space, but here merely persists, your body forced to continue functioning despite injuries that should be lethal. You endure psychological pressure that systematically dismantles your sanity, stripping away everything that made you an individual and replacing it with corruption. You endure spiritual assault that transforms your very soul, preparing it for the consumption that awaits when your body finally fails. The mortals who inhabit the eye are survivors, in the most brutal sense of that word. They have survived conditions designed to break them, outlasted torments that destroyed countless others. But survival in this context is not triumph. It is simply prolonged defeat, the extension of suffering across more time than should be possible. The eye allows you to survive far longer than you should, far longer than you want to, far longer than serves any purpose, except to provide more opportunities for torment. There is no happy ending to this tale, no moment of redemption or rescue that might vindicate the suffering. Those who enter the eye do not leave it unchanged, and most do not leave it at all. The few who do escape, pulled out by chaos forces for deployment in raids beyond the Pole, eye's borders, carry their corruption with them, spreading the eye's taint to whatever imperial worlds they attack. They are damned, and their survival serves only to damn others. For the billions of souls currently trapped within the eye's bounds, this is reality. Not a temporary hardship to be endured, not a crisis that will eventually resolve, but the permanent state of their existence for whatever remains of their lives and beyond. They wake each day, if day has meaning in a place where time flows erratically, knowing that this day will be terrible, that tomorrow will be equally terrible, that nothing will ever improve. They persist anyway, because giving up requires a choice, and the eye often does not grant even that small mercy. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. But for those trapped in the eye of terror, there is something worse than war. There is existence without purpose, suffering without end, corruption without cure. There is the slow transformation from human to monster, carried out over subjective years or decades or centuries until nothing remains of what you were. There is the knowledge that your soul will never rest, that even death offers no escape from the hunger of the dark gods. This is what it means to live in the eye of terror as a human in Warhammer 40,000. This is the fate of those who fall into chaos's grasp, whether through worship, capture, or cosmic misfortune. This is the nightmare that the Imperium fights desperately to prevent, knowing that every world that falls to chaos damns billions of souls to existences worse than any death. And this is the reality for the countless mortals who, at this very moment, toil in the eye's demon worlds, their screams adding to the psychic resonance that sustains the very powers that torment them. If you found value in this exploration of Warhammer 40k's darkest realm, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. There are countless other stories to tell from the grim darkness of the far future, and your support allows us to continue bringing them to you. Thank you for watching, and may the Emperor protect you, for in the eye of terror nothing else will.